Toast, toast. What's up? In a minute here. Y'all ready? Y'all ready for some Dr. Lecter? That's our new song by our boy Rooks G right there. What's up, gang? It's been a minute here. Are you ready for some Dr. Lecter? Dr. Lecter. Dr. Lecter, you might have seen me as a streetwalker in the movie Taxi Driver. Did you see that movie, Dr. Lecter? Yeah, tonight we're covering Thomas Harris's book, Red Dragon, and I'm going to talk about the film Manhunter by Michael Mann, as well as the movie Red Dragon that came out. I'll be talking a little bit about Silence of the Lambs, but this also, of course, is in the Hannibal Lecter universe, if that's what it's called, the Lecter sphere. Not a great universe to find yourself in, but this is an amazing book. It really is, and it's been a minute here since I've been on, and I I don't have the data. Everybody wants the numbers, right? You gotta integerize everything or whatever. I don't have the data for how much time I've spent ruminating on this book over the past several weeks. I watched Manhunter a number of times. I've seen it like I don't know, 322,000 times or whatever. Um, but I rewatched it a bunch of times over the past couple weeks, and we've covered Michael Mann before here. Of course, I did the film The Keep, which is not often covered. I even did the book analysis of that. That one was the Nazi Archons, and of course, I also covered Thomas Harris's book Kari Mora, which was his first book published since whatever the last Hannibal book was. I never was into this when I was younger. I didn't. I remember watching Silence of the Lambs for the first time at my friend Morgan's house when I was a teenager, and I was like, ah. And then Hannibal, the film Hannibal, was filmed here in Richmond, and that one was weird because they had just done a big revitalization of downtown Chaco Bottom, Richmond, and Gary Oldman, who's in the film Hannibal, was staying at my friend Justin Dre's house while he filmed the movie, and then he did the movie. I've also covered this one. This was in a recent little-known conspiracy movie stream where I covered The Contender, which Gary Oldman was also in. I think those were back-to-back because he stayed at my friend Justin's house both of those times, which was very weird because Justin said that he came home one day and Gary was mowing the grass in a bathrobe. So anyway, but this is not about Hannibal. The movie Hannibal kind of sickens me, especially the scenes with Ray Liotta. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about occult serial killers, and Red Dragon is pretty illuminating as far as that goes. I mean, it really is a fantastic book. Yes, Ash says I'd rather be in the McConaughey's psychosphere. I don't know. Would you? That's probably even worse. As long as you're Rust Cole, I guess it's all right. But I mean, he suffers too. It's interesting you say that, Ash, because Rust Cole and Will Graham are in the same kind of. They have the same mode as detectives, and Will Graham is interesting because he's not really he's a detective of all detectives. He has the same things, the same character traits as Sherlock Holmes. He's an eye detector, which we're going to get into. This has become a trope, of course, in television, especially in television, with the detective with the photographic memory or who has some sort of special second sight powers. But it's interesting, I think, to keep in mind where this stuff comes from. Of course, it's Sherlock Holmes. We think of the Sign of Four as the best Holmes story. And Red Dragon is great because Will Graham, especially in Manhunter, played by William Peterson, he really is phenomenal. And I'm going to talk. So what I'm going to talk about here is the Blakean aspects of Red Dragon and how that ties in with William Blake, whom I've really never covered. I mean, I have a whole playlist on here on romantic poets, romantic literature, British and American especially, and I've covered I've covered I think all the five major romantic poets. The five major romantic poets, of course, are Wordsworth and Coleridge, who wrote lyrical ballads published in 1798, and then we have Keats, Byron, and Shelley are the sort of big five. But William Blake is considered the godfather of English romantic poetry. He's sort of outside of that system and has a number of motifs in terms of his poetical writing that obviously foster the British Romantic spirit. 1798 to 1837 is the British Romantic period. It ends in 1837 with the ascension of Queen Victoria to the throne. And then, of course, we begin the Victorian era. And then in 1901, we end the Victorian era and we go into the true modernist era, even though we have the sort of Edwardian, brief Edwardian phase there, which we've gone into that with Oscar Wilde and The Picture of Dorian Gray. But this is what I think about this. First of all, my sort of my thesis for this stream right here is that although the Red Dragon is a clear apotheosis of the Gothic art, physical art, portraiture, engraving, and painting of William Blake, and the watercolor, the red dragon clothes and the woman clothed with the sun. There's two red dragon paintings, both of which are at the Brooklyn Museum as described in Red Dragon. I've seen William Blake's work displayed. I saw his Book of Job illustrations in person, but the the poetry and the literature of Blake is sets a theme for Red Dragon, a kind of gothic tone, which is dark and certainly past occult. I mean, William Blake is probably the most Gnostic of all Western poets, especially in the post Renaissance era, because he has a pure paradigm looking at life, at least in his poetic life, looking at his worldview, which comes to head with the Songs of Innocence and Experience, which are a kind of double-sided Neoplatonic vision of the world where darkness and evil are a kind of proactive physical energy. And that certainly sets a tone in Red Dragon because Francis Dollarhide is not only a very clear example of a DID serial killer, but he is purposefully occult. And one thing that really comes out in terms of Manhunter, there are parts of Red Dragon that get this with Ralph Fiennes, but especially in the book, we get much more depth and verbal illustration of Francis Dollarhide and who he is and your son. Do you see your son? He is part of a great becoming. Your son is changing. He's part of a great becoming. Is that a great big fat person? when Jodie Foster gets to the house in Silence of the Lambs, I've said this before. When she gets to the house in Silence of the Lambs, and Buffalo Bill answers the door, and she's looking for whoever it is, and he says, is that a great big fat person? Bust in the door. That's the guy. Who else answers the door like that? Just his facial expression. That's the guy. It's too weird. It's too weird for that not to be him. So, all right, so let's talk about, I'm going to kind of give a synthesis of these three works. There's no point in going through each of them separately because they sort of feed off one another, and there are some things that Red Dragon gets right that Manhunter doesn't, and vice versa. But let's look at the text here. So one thing that Thomas Harris is the thing that's noticeable about his writing is that, first of all, it's remarkable. I can remark on this, how well he writes women, and that's something that's sort of overlooked in terms of prose. But this is something that Harold Bloom pointed out when he talked about Shakespeare and the invention of the human, that Shakespeare writes female characters of far better than men. I think far better than most people. I think that one of the things that's noticeable about modern literature is there are very few great, prose writers, novelists who write women well. And what I mean by that is that it's not some sort of, I don't mean some sort of bullshit way of looking at, excuse my language, looking at literature in terms of some sort of Marxist, political paradigm. What I'm saying here is that it is very difficult, I think. Most people just accept characters as they take them. When you look at things, I think with maybe a little bit more of a critical eye, one can see that oftentimes female characters, especially written by men, not that this matters, but they tend to be a bit cliche or almost prosaic. Like there's just not a lot of depth. It's the things that you want to see or hear, but you can't really get that in terms of the thought process, because that's it takes a certain artistic imagination to do that, which is ironic, because that's one of the things that Will Graham the protagonist of Red Dragon has. And actually, Michael Mann does a great job of illustrating that in the Manhunter film. I'll mention this before I get back to the text here. The way you see this in the film Manhunter is, of course, art. In great art, one of the rules here is, we have form plus content equals meaning, and then we also have showing versus telling. And film, of course, seems like it would be more natural in order to accomplish that sort of goal because you're looking at visual images. But imagery is not just visual; it's all five senses. And sometimes actually watching the film, you notice any film, it's the soundscape and the sound editing that really contributes to this. An opposing example of this would be the criticism I have of Hans Zimmer scores for the most part. Not all of them, of course. I mean, I like the Dune score and everything, but when you watch, my big criticism is like when you watch Dark Knight Rises or Batman Begins, that's a sort of it's an example of what should be a kind of subtle exposition because the music, the score is telling you what to feel, and I think that's something a lot of people have a hard time, grasping that sort of critique. But just next time you catch those films, just tune into it because it almost becomes hypnotic. You hear this droning synth score of, it's like a fly buzzing, and that would be, remember the Dark Knight scene where like he has to like sky hook his way into the office building or whatever when he's in Hong Kong or wherever he is. That's probably the most noticeable example of it. And it's annoying because it's telling me, the viewer, what to think and what to feel, that I should feel nervous. And I don't need to be told that. It's almost, it's just, it's over the top. It's too much. I feel like the producers almost add that because they think that audiences can't understand it or make their way through a film like that. But I think that one example in the Michael Mann film, which does have a resonating synth score, almost a droning score, but it's used to maximum effect. There's a scene at the beginning of the sort of maybe a quarter of the way through the film, where Will is remember William Peterson is on the airplane, and he's got his files laid out in front of him, and he keeps the two pictures of the victims' families paperclip to the inside of the file, and he's reading through the autopsy reports, and he's just sort of living this character. And what happens in this scene is fantastic because we subtly slip into a dreamscape because he falls asleep on the plane, even though he's looking at the files. And then we know he's in a dream because afterwards he wakes up and the family, there's a girl sitting next to him on the plane, and the girl's mother closes the file, and the girl says, "Mommy," she happens to look over and see the crime scene pictures. Well, what happens in the scene when he's in the dreamscape is we see an exterior shot of him. He's in like a bathing suit and he's on a boat and he's lowering an engine into the boat. And he's got a guy with him. Now, the reason he's doing that is because Will is not only intensely cerebral, but he plays a counterpoint to what Lecter has. I'll come back to that in a second. But he has not only a keen mind for analytical thought, but he's able to feel what other people feel in a way that leaves a vacuum in his soul, but is purposeful. It's used purposefully to help him catch the killers that he's trying to catch. Right? He's an effective detective. An effective detective. He's an effective detective. Life looking for the killer. All filler, no thriller. So he's on the plane, and we see the exterior shot right in his dreamscape, and then the next cut is we see his wife, and it's a close up, and he's looking at his wife, and we see her blonde hair, and this is an idyllic scene, pastoral, pleasant, indicating that he's going deep inside of his own psyche to find peace. But the next cut is of him. And when it cuts to him, it's a frontal face shot, and he's looking like he's like this. He's looking directly at the camera. So that's a weird scene because you would think that it breaks the laws of perspective in terms of seeing himself when he's supposed to be looking at other people. We've already seen the exterior shot. But what it's actually indicating here is that he sees himself from his wife's point of view because they don't tell us this. They don't really they tell us he's an eye detector, but this is the way that it's shown in the film, is that subtly we realize that he can look at himself from another person's perspective, just as he can walk into a crime scene and talk and think as if he's the killer. And this is the reason that he looks pained there, is because he is seeing himself also. It's almost like he's sharing a dream with his wife. So he feels the presence of this looming serial killer who's now targeted him, plus Lecter in his cell who is communicating with the other killer, plus he's going all over the country. He's sort of outside of himself. He's just tried to recover from this last event where he caught Lecter, of course, and was stabbed. And he's been in a psychiatric hospital. So the beginning of the film is set with Dennis Farina. Hey, Dennis Farina there, Chief. Dennis Farina talking to him, where they're looking opposite ways on the beach, and the scene is from behind. One is facing us. Dennis Farina is facing away. So we have this this kind of double shot perspective. They're sitting on a tree trunk, which by the way is the exact thing that he does later when he goes into the woods I think it's the Leeds' house, one of the victims' families. When he goes into the woods to try and find perspective for where Dollarhide was hanging out, spying on the family. He does the exact same thing. So one thing Michael Mann does, which is effective, that Red Dragon, the movie, does not do, is it makes use of the text of the book to fill in physical blocking scenes that recur throughout the film. So as in a work of, it's the same as if you're looking at a poem. If you're looking at any great work of literature, there's a kind of echoing effect, almost like a spider web, where if you have a surface layer of meaning, if you have a superficial layer of meaning and you're looking at the surface, we're looking at the text itself. Well, next we have subtext. So we're looking below that. It's like if you're looking at the surface of the sea and you see an iceberg, and then we have that the larger part of the iceberg is submarine, right? Well, when we have layers of meaning, we keep going down in the layers, but the layers, which is the iceberg metaphor, kind of doesn't work here. It works up to a point, but it's almost like you picture an iceberg and a spider web, or inside a spider web, because the web has to be complete. If you're going to use one word that's indicative of something completely outside the norms of the rest of the poem in terms of its coded language, then you have to have other words throughout that match that. You can't. It's like in Macbeth when he uses the word incarnadine, right? He makes up this neologism and he says, "What blood is here? Will all great Neptune's oceans wash this blood clean from my hands? No, it will the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red." Right. So he says, "There's so much blood on my hands that Shakespeare, first of all, invents the word incarnadine as a verb to show it means to redden. So he has so much blood on his hands that it will take the whole ocean to wash the blood off his hands, but it won't wash it off. It'll make the ocean red," which is brilliant. But in order to do that, you have to have other words within the text to match it. So if you say Neptune's ocean, then we have to have various references to the Greek pantheon throughout the play. We have to have incarnadine makes you think of incarnate, right? Incarnation. We imagine then one of the major motifs of that play is the fact that that I was from my mother's womb untimely ripped, says Macduff. So we have the birth metaphor. We also have it again when Lady Macbeth is talking about the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements, and she says, "I would but pluck the infant with his boneless gums from my breast, rather than break an oath to her husband and dash the brains out." Right. So there has to be a system where the things match, and so this is great in Manhunter because Michael Mann continuously uses shots that indicate a pattern. There's an order. There's unity in variety. There's an order to the system, even though it seems like there's a chaotic threat. And in the book, there's a great quote about um yeah about Francis Dollarhide when he first goes to meet Reba, who is the blind woman that he meets, and he says that I'll just try to remember the quote. I think I got it verbatim. He says, it says, Francis Dollarhide had avoided reflective surfaces for his whole life. He avoided surfaces that reflect like a pool shark avoids corners. And that was interesting because he's a mirror man, right? He shatters mirrors and places mirror shards in the eyes of his victims. Remember at the end of Red Dragon, your son is changing. That part. Well, he kills with he's got this mirror shard, but that is a symbol of his broken psyche and how he sees himself in the eyes of others, just like William Peterson sees himself through the eyes of his wife, or sees other people through various perspectives. Um, so anyway, I'm getting too much into the weeds at the beginning of this, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a great continuity of purpose throughout the book and in the film. And one thing about about Thomas Harris and his writing of women, when he gets to Reba and the blind woman that Dollarhide knows from the emulsion lab in the photography unit, there's a great passage there are a few great passages with Reba, and she's so tragic. She's such a tragic character in the book. Joan Allen actually does pretty well in the film, and in Manhunter. I mean, she this. So this is should I talk about acting? This is a great example of how acting is on film is through the eyes. I've talked about this, I know, sort of ad nauseum, but Joan Allen. This is again ironic because the character of Reba is blind, but she's a blind seer. She sort of sees through her auditory senses, and when she is with Francis, she's the only character in the book that sees him, even though she can't see him. And the way that she talks to him it's so phenomenal. It's so tragic, and it's really wild for a book like this because you actually begin to sympathize with Dollarhide in parts of this. And I think that's important in the book because it makes it more three-dimensional and beyond. We don't get some, ridiculous character. He is ridiculous, but we don't get a ridiculous character that we can't understand who's a kind of threat from the outside that, and we go with this sort of cliche of the detective character who, we want to root for, but he's damaged. All that's great, but there has to be some more depth. And I'll just say last thing before I get into the text here is that William Peterson in Manhunter, if he didn't do anything else in his whole acting career, he's in The Contender, by the way, with Joan Allen and Gary Oldman. If he didn't do anything else in his career, it wouldn't matter. His performance in Manhunter is so good. He really this goes beyond what acting is. Mad Mink says the tiger scene is so crazy. The tiger scene, I mean, I gotta say that the tiger scene, like if you like, okay, this is gonna sound it's gonna sound pretty wanky here. It's just pretty wanky here, right? Wanka. No, but listen, if you are a person who likes film, you probably don't admit it, but you know that there are movies you watch where you have tears welling up in your eyes, and it's not from the emotional impact of whatever the scene is. I mean, yeah, you watch War Horse, and it just flows. If you watch War Horse, don't watch it. No, but there are scenes in film. I kind of get this with like The Thin Red Line, where the film you happen to be watching catches what art is supposed to be all the time. Art is about two things. Art is all art. All great art is about this. One, our relationship with God. In other words, we're asking the question, who are we? Right? Who are we? Why and why are we here? And the second is our relationship with each other. How do we get along? How do we make our way through life while we're here? What are we doing? Why are we doing the things that we're doing, and what are we doing? Now, all art is about that, especially when you are experiencing art that is not about those things, because it always ends up by default being about that. And the scene with the tiger in Manhunter is sublime. It is yeah, yes, Maddie. I'm gay actor Edward Norton. No, uh, the the scene with the tiger is so perfectly done. I mean, it really is an example. I think it's probably, I would say that the scene with the tiger in Manhunter is probably the single best moment in film that Michael Mann ever did. It's absolutely it's kind of hard to comprehend what's happening. Um, so yeah, real John Connor says Ernest Goes to the Dentist does it for me. I think Ernest Scared Stupid probably does that. How about a bumper sandwich, booger lips? All right, so let me take you into Red Dragon here. This is the book by Thomas Harris, and this was his second novel. He wrote one called Black September in the 70s, but this was his first foray into the serial killer stratosphere or whatever, and it's interesting that Silence of the Lambs followed this. Thomas Harris I also like, of course, because he's from Mississippi. I think he lives in Florida. We covered that in Kari Mora. He runs he funds a habitat, some kind of bird sanctuary in Florida, very low key, but he's a Mississippi writer, so I like that. And so let me take you through a couple of things here. First of all, what is it about? Well, if you're unfamiliar at this point, with Hannibal or Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs, the Hannibal series that they had. There was a brief Silence of the Lambs series, and then of course the novels. I mean, I've just read Red Dragon. I'm not reading Silence of the Lambs or any of the other ones. I've read Kari Mora, of course, because that one was a tangent away from Hannibal Lecter. And the critics, by the way, did not like the book, and I disagree. I disagree with them on that. So what happens here is that we have a detective named Will Graham, and the book begins sort of in media res in terms of his career. He is not a former FBI agent. I'm an FBI, right, Johnny Utah? Instead, he's actually a consultant. He worked in the FBI crime lab, but he wasn't an agent. And before that, it says that he was a detective in New Orleans. He was a Baton Rouge down there in New Orleans. What they throwing gumbo down on the track. Stop Cajun hate. So he was a detective down there, and he has solved two serial killer cases. One is the Minnesota Shrike, and Lecter has helped him catch the Minnesota Shrike. The Shrike is a bird. Shrike in Latin means butcher. This is a guy who was targeting sorority girls, so it makes you think of course, the Ted Bundy. It makes you think of the Ted Bundy situation down. I think they caught him in Gainesville, right? But of course, McGowan talks about how that is strange, and there are many ties in with Program to Kill. It's almost like Thomas Harris absorbed Program to Kill before it was written, and really takes his killer into that territory, because we have a set of serial killers who are communicating with each other, and we learned that in McGowan. McGowan brings that out, especially with apparently the communication between Bundy and Son of Sam, and then also how Bundy helped to catch the Green River Killer. Do you remember that? So there are ties in with Lecter and Ted Bundy, but the in terms of the mental ties, they kind of stopped there, because even though that's sort of a setup for Silence of the Lambs and what's happening in terms of catching Buffalo Bill and looking at the case files, I think Lecter is based on this guy Robert Maudsley. I can't remember his name. He's the longest serving English Englishman in solitary confinement, and I think that he was targeting creepers. Um, but I read one thing on him, and it talked about how he stalked. He smoked three guys in the facility. Governor, two of whom were on one single day. He walked up and down the corridor, stalking his prey, and that of course ties in with the quote that I just gave you from the book about the pool shark and avoiding angles because avoiding corners because of the word shark. Because Francis Dollarhide is a kind of shark. Of course, he's an apex predator serial killer, but he's also swimming through the dark waters of the sea of people in America, targeting his prey. And Lecter, of course, Dr. Lecter, has a superior sense of smell. The first thing that he does in the movie when he meets Will Graham is smell him, right? He notices the aftershave. He does that in the book as well. That's the same atrocious aftershave you wore at the trial, right? And from there, he can deduce that he's wearing an aftershave that has a boat on it and a sailboat, one that a child would give. So then he thinks about boats, taking him to a place like Florida, of course, because he is also tan. So he kind of does a weird echolocation through his olfactory sense, sort of synesthesia here, finding where Will Graham lives. And of course, he finds him right away. He finds his address because Lecter is in a jail cell at this point because the last person that Will Graham caught was Hannibal Lecter. He was using him as a consultant for finding the Minnesota Shrike. And then he's going after this series of cannibal murders. And of course, finally finds out that Lecter was the guy because in Red Dragon, he finds a copy of Larousse's Gastronomique. But in the book, I think it's a copy of a book called Body Man. And anyway, he finds the notes for Sweetbread. And so going back to the shark here, one of the things in the book about Francis Dollarhide is his teeth. They find him through his teeth marks, and he has the kind of jagged, vampirical jaws teeth of a shark because he bites. He's a biter, they say. He bites his victims. When he first meets Reba, one of the things that he imagines is he has the voice of the Red Dragon in his head. This is where the two characters, the unseen character of the Red Dragon, who's seen through his possession of Francis Dollarhide, this is where they start to diverge, and he really dissociates before he consumes the Red Dragon by eating the copy of Blake's painting at the Brooklyn Museum. But he imagines Reba, and he says, what would she look like if he bit her fingers off? And then he has to push down those feelings because at that point, that's the point in the book where he realizes that the Red Dragon is a separate entity. You remember that Dennis Rader also had this. He had this with his what he called Batter X. Batter X was one of the two names for his dark passenger, his other self, which was his occult demonic spirit that possessed him. Dahmer said the same thing. A number of these guys have said the same thing. Chugging that Red Bull. Sorry if you can hear that. Hey, listen, shouts out to everybody out there. If you are out there at home, you're chilling. If you are riding through the dark night, if you're night crawling down the highways of America, if you are out riding the storms, if you're an outrider, if you're a night rider, if you're a night crawler, they call me Peanut Arbuckle. They call me Go-Go Nuts. They call me Doorway. If you are out there riding the dark night of America and you're listening to this, I'm sorry for that chugging sound of my Red Bull. But hey, why don't you smash that like and think about supporting me right here. You can drop a super chat, of course. You can drop a PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. We got all the links up there in the video description. And thanks to all my mods out there. Thanks to everybody who's watching right now. Appreciate y'all. Let's keep going into Red Dragon. So Will Graham is looking for this killer, and at the beginning of the book, he has retired off to fix boaters, and he's off to fix motorboats. You motorboat son of a bitch, you old sailor, you. So the reason he does that is that he is working with his hands, so he doesn't have to think. You understand that? Do you even understand that, people? That allows him to do something physical where he doesn't have to think, because most of his life is spent in such a dark part of the continent or of the dark sea, looking for these various shark predators. And so anyway, Dennis Farina, whom you remember I met on the street in New York when I lived in Manhattan. Here's how the meeting went down. This is what I call meeting. I was walking to my job at the bar, and I was walking down the street, and he was filming a scene from Law and Order, which happened to also co-star my friend Paul's sister, happened to be in that episode, and Eliza. And so anyway, they were filming the scene. I was just walking to work through the East Village, and lo and behold, there's Dennis Farina. And I happened to walk up before they were shooting. I was walking right past it. I went, "Hey, Dennis Farina." Anyway, "Hey, how you doing there, guy? How you doing there, pal? Good to see you." But what I got to say about Dennis Farina is that he is phenomenal. He is perfect in this film. It's amazing to find a guy who's not a trained actor. I mean, this guy is I think he was a former, he's a former homicide detective in Chicago that Michael Mann discovered, and put him in the movie Thief, which I covered. I've done a whole series of Michael Mann streams, and he is totally phenomenal because he makes you as a viewer believe that he is the guy that you would want to go to if you had problems. This guy. One thing about Red Dragon. Okay. One of the strengths of this novel and of the film Manhunter is that they do the opposite thing from the trope of most detective movies. The only other movie I can think of that does this is Prisoners, and with Jake Gyllenhaal, who is phenomenal also, and has the kind of attitude that Will Graham does in terms of finding the person. Well, in both of these movies and in the book Red Dragon, what you realize when you get into it is that this is the one instance where the authorities have devoted all of their resources to finding the guy. Because usually we get a team or we get a lone person who doesn't give up. You get this in Zodiac, right? Remember in Zodiac, it takes the reporter going after him, again, Jake Gyllenhaal, and, Robert Downey Jr.'s in it, and they're looking for him. The police are kind of off and on. What's his face? Is like, the case is closed. We're off they don't go for the guy. In this, they devote all of these people and all these teams to finding him. And the people in charge they say, whatever you want, whenever you want it, you can find this. We'll help you to find this killer. And I find that that's kind of refreshing in terms of movies. It goes against type. A great example of that is how right after Will Graham decides to take on the case, he flies off to Atlanta. The murders were in Atlanta and Birmingham. He flies off to one of these two places, and there's a local cop, Leo, who drops him off at the house. And the guy says, do you want me to? The conversation is basically, here's the place. I'll be here. He doesn't even have to say it. He's like, I'll be here. Whatever you need. When the wife later wakes up at her place in Florida and looks outside, the son wakes her up and says, there's cops, there's something outside. She walks to the door, and the first thing you see is this big-ass burly cop in the doorway. I think you should go back inside, ma'am. They take him to the isolated location. They pick him up. They put him on planes everywhere. And when they drop off Will Graham at the prison to go see Lecter, again, they let him go in. They leave him alone. There are a number of instances in the book where this is refreshing to see that there is a character who is allowed to do the thing that he was meant to do. You don't really get this too much. A lot of times, even in real life, you often get that one of the biggest hurdles people have is that they cannot reconcile that there's somebody who's better than them at something, whatever that is. It's kind of like when you're talking to your friend and you bring up a point or something that you know or something, and then they say, "Yeah, yeah, I knew that," or they bring up something that you told them, and they don't know that you told them that, right? Which I always find is best to just leave because it's kind of annoying to be like, "Yeah, I told you that," but there comes a point where that's a thing. But people don't want to reconcile. They can't reconcile that there's a character who is the supreme example of really the troubled genius. I mean, Will Graham he looks unkempt. He's not shaven. His hair's kind of mussy. His clothes are kind of ill-fitting. And he just kind of comes out of nowhere and can go anywhere and do anything. He's like what Bill Hartford wishes he could be in Eyes Wide Shut. But we know that he's being gang stalked and gaslit into finding that whole system out in Eyes Wide Shut. But this is different. This is like a character who is the other people are told, leave him alone. If he wants to be left alone, leave him alone. Don't talk to him. Don't watch over him. When he goes in there to talk to Lecter, let him do his thing. And that's really, I think that's really interesting. It's a really fascinating portrait of where a gift can get you, I think. And that's because he produces results. So Will has killed the first serial killer, and then Lecter he caught, and he gets stabbed by Lecter. And in the film Red Dragon, he of course puts the Anne Rice violin. Is it Saint Sebastian? Who was martyred with being shot with bow and arrow? Was that Saint Sebastian? And so Lecter ends up in the prison cell. And so when Will Graham then goes to visit Lecter in jail, one thing that the way that the dialogue goes is that Lecter tests him by saying, "You think you're better than me?" No, he says, Do you think you are smarter than me because you caught me? How did you catch me?" And Will says to him, I know I'm not smarter than you. So this is a good example because Will knows that Lecter is smarter than he is, but Lecter lacks the thing that Will Graham has. So here's the key to Lecter that I realized while reading this book. Lecter is the ultimate psychopath. Right, he's charming, he's devilish. He's not. The book makes clear that one of the differences between sociopath and psychopath, as if this matters, I guess. But one of the differences is that the sociopath is thrown off by petty issues, and the psychopath is imitative of humans, but is not thrown off by things. It's through charm in terms of a kind of whatever the higher calling is, whatever the higher motif is, whether it's being a CEO or serial killer, whatever the things we think of psychopaths like that, what that is. But Lecter has this, but Lecter is all brain and imagination, but he lacks the human ability to connect. He lacks the ability to connect as a human being, which is why he consumes human beings. Whereas Will Graham is operating in the same sea and has the same sort of gift, but where he doesn't have Lecter's brain capacity for an eidetic memory, he has something which is a separate gift, which is the ability to imagine and to feel what Lecter would feel or what Francis Dolarhyde feels, which is really fascinating. It's something that is incredibly nuanced in this. You think you're better than me? Remember, that's what Peter Griffin says is the argument of every dumb guy at a Boston Red Sox game. Hey, you think you're better than me? So Will Graham So Will first goes to the house and he walks into the most recent crime scene, and he's got his tape recorder, and he's walking. He goes straight. He walks in through the glass window. He's looking at his crime scene files. He walks up the window, up the staircase into the bedroom, and turns on the lights. And immediately we're struck with all of the blood spatter spray in the room, and he can't figure out why there are stains on the walls. And he knows that the blood stain on the floor is because Francis Dolarhyde went in first and cut the throat of the husband, and then he what did he do? He shot the wife in the stomach, and then she died. She died after that, I think, of strangulation, indicated by the histamine levels in the gunshot wound, the increase in histamine, and so that indicates that she lived for about 5 minutes afterwards. And the husband is on the floor because he was still fighting. The arterial blood spatter on the wall indicates that he got up trying to fight because he knew Dolarhyde would next move into the kids' rooms. One thing that is really horrible, really, really terrible in the book is that's different from the films, and they left this out, is that we know that this is a small detail, but really, really makes it horrifying, is that he shot the children, and one of them had to have been pulled from under the bed, so he was hiding under the bed because there's a dust ball in his hair. Really horrifying. And he later figures out that the bloodstains on the walls are where he moved them post-mortem to set them up as an audience, because when he places the mirror shards in their eyes, it's so that he can see himself. Now, the whole thing with Mirror Man that I've been working on because this has been soaking into my own psyche for a long time with this book that I'm writing, Monarch. And one of the things with the mirror shards that I find so I guess evocative here is that Dolarhyde is placing mirrors in their eyes so that it mimics the movements of a human moving across the visual spectrum of a person watching him, because he can only be himself and become, as he says, with a dead audience, right? And that he is absorbing their souls into his soul as part of a sacrifice for Red Dragon, which is the same thing that Zodiac said in his letters and that Son of Sam wrote in his Program to Kill letters, basically that he is collecting souls to be his slaves in hell, which makes this a Program to Kill, Dave McGowan, full-on climactic occult serial killer that is beyond even the scope of Phoenix Program. I think this is like real demonic shit, and that's where Blake comes into our view here, because the entire thing is based on the paintings of William Blake, the Red Dragon, and the woman clothed with the sun and the woman clothed in the sun. There are two of them. One is, you can look these up. One is the Red Dragon, and this is from Revelation. So the Red Dragon is flying face down over the face of the earth, and there's a woman face up, and his tail, his dragon's tail, is wrapped around the woman. The other is, of course, the back. We're looking at a perspective, looking at the back of the Red Dragon, full of what people have called. I read what was one critic wrote about this in her dissertation, was that the painting represents a dark charge of demonic sexual energy, because we see the back of the Red Dragon with wings spread, and we can't see his face, but only Francis Dolarhyde imagines that he has seen the face of the Red Dragon, and that is why he does in the book, he does constant bodybuilding. He's a huge guy, and he does bodybuilding so that his back is muscular. He goes to he takes a 3-month leave of absence from work at one point and goes off to Hong Kong to get his dragon tattoo on his back. The difference between the book and the movie is that in the film Red Dragon, the tail goes down the back of his thigh, but in the book, it wraps all the way around his leg, and his wings spreading represent his becoming, filled with the illuminating light of the, I guess, the demiurgic, Gnostic, uh, liberating God, so that I'm probably mixing up my terms here, but because this really is, I think this book really does hit on something that is ingrained within the spirit of romanticism and freedom, which is that when we think of freedom and liberation, it isn't the freedom to be an American and be able to, buy Zip Wow and Gicky Gackers and McDonald's all the time, and as long as they're not doing it, as long as they keep in their bedroom, all that stuff. Absolute liberation in the Blakean romantic sense reaches its apotheosis in a kind of Crowleyan system where it's the liberation to do anything, do what thou wilt, right? And this is even into a metaphysical sense, this is the consuming of souls. So it goes beyond the body freedom, the bodily freedom, the temporal freedom into something that is transcendent for Francis Dollarhide. And he really is almost a purely satanic hero here, in terms of a kind of Paradise Lost, Miltonian sense. And Blake is a kind of inheritor of Milton. And I think that's what's so horrifying about it, is that he looks like a monster, and if he were grounded and were not, he goes through his awful childhood, which is described in the book, and his trauma and his kind of breaking of the psyche in this. If he didn't go, if he went to church, if he didn't have this, if he had something else, then this would be a guy who could just live. The way that Reba sees him, is really beautiful in the book, because the way she talks to him is like the way it's very weird how this happens. The way Reba talks to Francis Dollarhide is the way that any person in love, like with lifelong true love, finding the one you love, the way that you would want them to see you, I suppose. Not seeing him. I'm saying see you if it was a different situation. Because she has an ability to understand what probably pains him, and that's his physical appearance, and to put it out there with truth, but also with kindness. And so that's the reason why in the book he ends up fighting against himself. So Francis Dollarhide is trying to consume these families as a sacrifice, but ends up fighting against his dissociative split self, who is Red Dragon, and ends up blowing his head off. But there's a twist to this, because he thinks that he is killing the Red Dragon, but he's actually just killing his idea of himself before he kind of transcends into the Red Dragon and goes after Will Graham. So anyway, what happens is that Will Graham goes into the house, he does all of his looking around, and then he gets videotapes of the families at home, and he watches them obsessively until he finally decides that he has to go visit Hannibal Lecter. He's got to go visit Lecter because he needs to put himself back into the mindset of what it takes to catch a killer, and he needs to do this through his kind of mentor, which is Lecter. And what's really great about that is that in Manhunter, the scene where he sees Lecter in prison is an example of why this is so much better, or at least different than the film Red Dragon. And I think Silence of the Lambs suffers in this sense, which is that Anthony Hopkins is a kind of 19th century stage melodramatic serial killer, which is not better or worse. I think it's just different. Whereas Brian Cox's Lecter is a Bela Lugosi early film star version of a serial killer. He looks vampirical. I mean, he really does. When you see him, he's face down and he is got a kind of widow's peak, a kind of Michael Aquino, Bela Lugosi widow's peak. And notice how he does the Michael Caine thing. He doesn't blink. I'm not blinking. I'm not blinking. See, that's the key to any film. You see, I'm not blinking. I'm looking right here in your eye, and if I have to blink, I go, "What's that explosion?" Look, there was an explosion. So I had to blink right there, but I can sit here and wait till my eyes burn. My eyes will burn longer than anyone else, right? Master Wayne, did you see that? Master Wayne, when I was back there in Burma, we found, Master Wayne, when I was back there in Burma, we found rubies the size of crack rocks, Master Wayne. Did you know that? Yes, Will Graham, right, he's not blinking. Right, rubies. He's not blinking. And this is because Brian Cox's Lecter is much more, what's the word? He's probably truer to life in terms of a real monster serial killer rather than the stage version of what Lecter has. Also, the thing that's always bothered me about Silence of the Lambs is the setting when, first of all, why did they put Jodie Foster on her first case or whatever with the worst guy? Why would they do that? Same problem that Longlegs has. Let me in, not yesterday, not today, not tomorrow, let me in, right? It's Nick Cage doing neo-shamanic German expressionistic hand signs, right? While I wonder if that's why they did that. I bet they did Longlegs like that with this. Right? He's like, let me in, not yesterday. Why is he doing that? You only see the bottom of his face, I guess, because of Manhunter with his stocking covering his hair. Like, it comes down to here, but his cleft palate is visible until he can reveal himself as Red Dragon. So one of the things in the book that's so interesting in terms of continuity is how consistent Francis Dollarhide is with sounds. He suffers with the sibilant and the fricative S's, so he avoids them in sentences, just like he avoids reflective surfaces and puddles and mirrors, because and how his house is indicative of his inner state. It's rotted. It's broken down. I'm talking about Red Dragon in the book. It's rotted, broken down. The wheelchair that he brings out, that he puts Philip Seymour Hoffman or Stephen Lang, puts them on, right? So Philip Seymour Hoffman's there. No, I don't want to see you. No, I don't want to see you. No. All these things are like brown, rusted, and rotting. It's different in that was weird in Manhunter how they had his house because it looked like a postmodernistic dead tech Al Pacino house in Florida, but it's supposed to be in St. Louis, and it's filled with light and windows. I found that kind of odd that they would do that. I'm not sure whether that actually fit. That might be a weakness in the thing, except for at the end, it allows for at the climax of the film for Will Graham to come running through the glass, which is a reflection of the fact that Dollarhide enters the house through the glass window in the first house that he's investigating. When he's investigating that house, he says that they identified him and they match him up with the other killings because they found saliva samples. And why would he allow himself to leave a saliva sample? He doesn't leave any prints. He doesn't ever leave anything. He doesn't ever leave any forensic evidence unless it's purposeful. And so I guess he leaves the saliva on the window because he has to lick the suction cup on the glass that he uses for the glass cutter to make his way inside. Also, we realize that He has in the other house. One of the great things in this is how Will comes about the forensic evidence in terms of the house. Is like, so he goes to the house and he sees that there's a deadbolt on the inside of the door downstairs, and that they've recently installed a lock on the outside. Well, that leads him on to figuring out that he must have known that they installed the lock, because how would he know? Because he looks from the inside. How would he know all of this imagery? Because he's watched the same tapes that Will is watching, which puts Will, by the way, further into, in a kind of meta sense, into the mind of the serial killer, because he's now doing the exact same thing that Dollarhide was doing. Right. Well, he realizes that when he goes out into the woods behind the house and he backs up into the woods, just like the cop who gives Lecter the phone in Manhunter does. You notice that he walks in, and they changed this for Red Dragon. He walks in and he says, "Turn around, face the wall. If you turn around, I'm going to mace you in the face." And the guy is this big ass cop. And what I thought about that cop, the casting of that cop, is there's in a lot of movies with serial killers or psychopaths, there will be one character who will always function as a kind of angel, an angel in disguise, who is the only character who thwarts or frightens the serial killer. This happened in American Psycho. Remember where he went into the apartment and the old lady, the real estate agent, says, "Leave and never come back"? It's the only guy Bateman's afraid of in the book and the movie. In No Country for Old Men, you remember the big lady, the best casting I've ever seen. The old lady at the motel who says, "There ain't no adjacent rooms," right? And what does Sugar do? He backs out of the room. Bateman backs out of the room. Sugar backs out of the room. It's the same thing in Manhunter, because this character comes in and is the only character really that thwarts him. I mean, of course, Will Graham does that, but that, he doesn't do it in his immediacy. He's in one scene, and you notice that the way he does that is that after Lecter makes the phone call in Manhunter, where he calls he's receiving a call, or he's calling his lawyer, which is why this is great. Lecter can only talk to one person without being recorded, right? Which is attorney-client privilege. He can only talk to his attorney. So he has a phone with no dial on it. He gets the black phone. He takes the lid off, and he calls the University of Chicago Psychiatric Institute or Psychiatric Department, and he uses the aluminum foil from the bubble gum to change the dial tone. Right? It's amazing how Lecter is so tuned in. Lecter is locked up, but he's locked in. He is completely dialed in on the telephone. He's dialed in to everything happening on the outside world. And this is another example of the ultimate predatory psycho serial killer, because you can tell when you look at Lecter, Brian Cox's Lecter, that jail and prison do not hold him. It makes no difference to him where he is. He can still do the exact same things he was doing on the inside, sans, eating the people, but he can still operate with the same amount of ubiquitous energy that he has when he was on the outside. It's just in a kind of almost concentrates his mental form, right? His body is locked in the cell, but he's able to escape it through his wiles, which is really interesting. But when he makes the phone call, he does this thing where he says, he puts the phone down and he says, "I'm finished." And we don't hear a response, which is to say that this guard is the only guy that thwarts him. He's not waiting hand and foot on Lecter. He doesn't right. Also, there's one fantastic thing that I noticed after Graham leaves the interview with Lecter, and this is really subtle. Check this out. So when he gets overloaded with information from Lecter, and he also backs out of the cell, and he runs out of the cell and trying to get fresh air outside of the prison. You notice this in Manhunter. he has to run in concentric circles down. He has to escape by going down. The cell is up. So it puts him in a sanitized, totally white, sanitized version of Dante's hell, because he has to escape. The only way to escape hell from Dante is to go down. Remember, he goes down into the ninth circle, into frozen hell, and then he climbs up the body of Satan, which inverts and then is down. And Satan is face down in the ice because it's at the bottom of the world. It's so hot that it's cold. And he is face down from where he fell from heaven. So he has to climb up the body, which ends up being down. And when he climbs up the head, he ends up back on the outside world. Well, that's what Will does, climbing down. Now, of course, Lecter is not Satan, but he's a demonic form. So he's not in the ninth circle. So he has to run down these concentric circles. When he finally escapes the prison, when he opens the door, this is really crazy. When he opens the door of the prison, we see about a millisecond shot of black and white. The outside is black and white. The rest of the movie is soaked in color. It's almost completely neon. Everything is lit up in this film for contrast, and yet we see black and white. And then he goes and leans on the rails and looks down, and the grass is color spectrum. It's chroma keyed. Did you notice that? When he blinks, and then when he blinks his eyes, we see black, and then we see the grass back how it was. So it's a really, this is really masterful. This is a visual representation of the psychic mind, the inner mind, psyche of the mind of Will Graham. I mean, it's crazy. We're not, we're told all this in the movie Red Dragon with Edward Norton. Look, man, Red Dragon is frustrating. It's a frustrating film to watch because Ralph Fiennes is very good as Dollarhide. I think that what Ralph Fiennes, the great points about Dollarhide that Ralph Fiennes has, Tom Noonan, the actor who plays Dollarhide in Manhunter, does not have. And there's one particular part that I'm going to get to in a second that is really frustrating in Manhunter. But Edward Norton is really bad in this movie, really bad. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it until I watched it again recently. He's awful. I couldn't believe, and I don't know why, because Edward Norton is a good actor. He's fantastic in Kingdom of Heaven. He's great in Fight Club that we just covered. I just covered the book, Chuck Palahniuk's book, and the film. He's really bad in this. And I think that it is down to the fact that he probably took the role for financial benefit, and that the director, who's the director? Who directed Red Dragon? It's somebody big. It's like Joel Silver produced it. Not Joel Silver. It's not. It's Brett Ratner did it. We like Joel Silver right now. Joel Silver gave a shout out to our friend Toby, who is out there making big moves with his movies. So it's not him, it's Brett Ratner. And I don't know what happened. Yeah, American History X. Not welcome. Edward Norton's great. But in this movie, he's so bad. Here's why he's bad. When they're showing Edward Norton go back to his hotel room after he goes to the first house, and he's got the pictures of the victims lined up in a circle around him. First of all, you're going to have the only picture that matters buried under three other photographs. It doesn't make sense. Every other picture is lined up in a semicircle around you, and then you're going to have the two that are buried under another picture. He didn't think to lay all the pictures out. It's stupid. That was a stupid, fake reveal scene. That was dumb how they did that. There's a lot of that. There's another one where, so he's in there, and he does this. This is exactly what he does. Go back and watch Red Dragon, because this is what he does. He goes, so he sees things. He sees things, bings, tings, lings, things, pictures, Pictionary, dictionary, fictional. It's like a work of fiction. There's a book. He's trying to see things with his mind, eyes, brain, eyes, mind, brain, eyes, mirrors, mirror shards. He puts mirror shards in their eyes. You're like, what are you doing? Why are you thinking with your hands like this? What are you, is this improvised? What is this? Ugh. There's a small part in Manhunter that bothers me too, and it's when this is not the big thing that bothers me. I'll get to that in a second. The thing that bothers me is that he catches Freddie Lowndes, who's played by Stephen Lang, and he's the journalist. He catches him, he puts him in the wheelchair. I think he's tied up in the Manhunter instead of glued. He's supposed to be glued to the wheelchair so he can't move his skin. And he's getting him to read the letter that he's gonna send to the paper and to the feds. And this is a small thing, but I noticed that he does this. He goes, you're gonna read this. You're gonna read this letter. Click, go. Do you understand what I'm saying? The whole point is that they won't be able to identify his voice. They don't know him, and that the voice of Freddie Lowndes is talking through him. Why would you press the record button and then say go? Why wouldn't you say go and then record? It's a small thing. I think they just lost that in continuity. But that little thing ruins it. It ruins that part. And here's my biggest criticism of of Manhunter. Okay. So the scene where he catches Freddie Lowndes and he is going through his becoming and he's explaining his becoming. Do you see? Do you see? Do you see? That whole scene? Ralph Fiennes is great at that scene. Because he comes in, he's got perfect drama school stance, straight drama school stance. He walks in, he's got his kimono, and he reveals himself, and he's now the Red Dragon before he helps him along his way to becoming. Okay. Well, when Ralph Fiennes is saying it, we believe that he is this guy, and it's really terrifying. That's why Philip Seymour Hoffman, no, I don't want to see that whole scene. But when Tom Noonan says it, he's reading the script. It's like he learned his sides, and I don't know what it is, man. It's like there's one part of his line is something like, "You are part of a great becoming. You are privy." But Tom Noonan says, "You are part of a great becoming. You are privy." Like he breaks the line in the wrong place. Becoming in the text is capitalized. The becoming is the apotheosis, right? You are part of a great becoming. You are privy. And he says, you don't owe me your life. You owe me your all. Which Ralph Fiennes verbalizes, and you believe it because it's a capital A, all. Like as if he is bowing down to a demonic figure here. Some sort of, spiritual being from beyond. But Tom Noonan says, you don't owe me that. You owe me all. What? I can't even understand what you're saying. Why would Michael Mann let him do that? Why would they take that scene? It's the one scene in the film that destroys the integrity of the whole film. It doesn't ruin the film. Manhunter is phenomenal. But that one scene, I'm so disappointed every time I watch that scene. I don't believe you. William Peterson, look, man, the first time that Peterson goes and he talks with his team, and then he goes outside, and Dennis Farina's here, William Peterson's talking, and it's like when he's just gotten on the case. Look at his eyes. His eyes are bloodshot, red, strained. And you look in his eyes and you go, this guy is up. and he's barely living, but he's dedicating all of his purpose in life to finding this guy. He's decided this is going to be the thing, and he doesn't blink. And you can't act that. That's not acting. Like you can't fake that. It's acting, but it goes beyond that. This is like real acting. This is something that every great actor really wants to have, which is the ability for the audience to look in your eyes and believe that you are discovering the things in real time. When he's watching the film in the hotel room, this is the opposite of Edward Norton. Edward Norton does they're doing this. When Edward Norton is looking at the films, the perspective is that we don't see the screen. We can't see what he's watching on the screen, and it's like 45-degree angle. We kind of see him in darkness, and he's like this. It's like a diagonal angle, and he's looking at it, and he's talking aloud. He's not even talking to himself. You know that he's talking into the psychosphere. And when he's looking at the screen, he says, "You did it. You've seen this. You've seen this, you son of a bitch." And when he says it, you see his eyes light up, and you understand watching it that this guy is existing right now in life and has just discovered that. It doesn't matter how many times you watch the film. Doesn't matter how much you know the scene. Doesn't matter what you know about what's going to happen. That the world in the film is happening right now. And this is what art is supposed to be. This is what literature is supposed to be. When you are analyzing literature, when you're analyzing film, this is why when you write papers or academic papers about, with criticism about literature, you write them in the present tense, because the literature lives and the things are happening now in real time. No matter what, they're infinitely happening now because the thing lives. So when you're watching him, you believe it. When he's at the other house and he goes into the woods, Edward Norton's like, "So you're saying that they have a big backyard? They have a big backyard? So he can, what? He can go into the woods? What?" It's like you're not cognizant of the fact of what you're discovering in the moment. When Peterson does it, he backs into the woods. He's walking around. He's looking at the house, and you can see that he's imagining that he knows that if he were the killer in that scene, he would be in the woods so he could stalk through the woods like you're stalking prey, and that he's looking at their bodies lighting dark against the illuminated windows within the house as darkness falls. So he needs a perch, like he's going up into a deer stand. So he goes and he sits down on this tree trunk, and the tree trunk is exactly where, like, that's where he was, just transposed from the beginning of the film. He looks down and he sees the tab from a Coke can. Well, that could be anything. He picks it up. But in Red Dragon, this is so annoying. In Red Dragon, the lopped off branch from up in the tree is at the foot of the tree. He sees the lopped off, but picks it up. That's not in the film. It's not in Manhunter. It's not in the book. Why would he do this? Guy's careful about everything. What it indicates in the book is that he goes to the tree and he climbs up the tree where the tree forks, and this is a perfect perch for him to watch, right? He looks at the tree, and he notices a sigil carved in the tree 33 feet up. And the sigil, he figures out, is a mahjong character for the dragon. And that's because when Dollarhide was young and his grandmother was torturing him and had this house full of, it was a house for old people to retire or whatever. And she played mahjong, and that was one of the only toys that he had, was to play with these things on the ground, and that was the character that he picked up. And then that matches his torture from his grandmother after he has his bodily accident, and his grandmother says these awful things to him, which are the opposite of his becoming. So she calls him disgusting little pig and all this stuff. It's awful. It's like Alec Baldwin talking to his kids. And so the opposite is that he has an audience, and becomes this beast character, a disgusting beast character, but one that consumes other people. And it's also like Edmund Kemper. Like I'm talking about his grandmother. I mean about his mother, right? Because he, it's like Prince Harry talking about Charles actually in the Charles autobiography Spare. And speaking of which, that's going to be coming up sometime, hopefully soon in September. I'm going to be doing a full analysis of the book Spare with Jamie is going to help me with that, and we're going to talk about Prince Charles and this really crazy book that I read on Harry, which is it really is crazy. So hopefully that will be illuminating and edifying. Hey, by the way, don't forget, smash the like. If you got any questions or comments, if you want to leave any super chats, I will get to those at the end of the stream, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about Red Dragon or Hannibal Lecter or whatever you may have. Even Oasis, right? I need to be myself. Yo, Oasis reuniting. I'm very, very excited. I'm really excited about Oasis reuniting. I hope they do. Listen, man, if Oasis does a world tour, if they come to America, I'm going. I don't care what it takes. I'm going. I will go. Shit, I'll go alone. I don't even care. I'll go. I'm going. I want to go with. I'm going. I would try to get tickets for Wembley or Croke Park in Dublin. I saw Red Hot Chili Peppers in Dublin at that same place. And, I would go, but, let's just say it's best to stay here. And I wouldn't be excited to see, I'm really not excited to see any other band or anything else live anymore. I've been to my share of concerts and festivals in life, and that's all cool. But I want to go see Oasis. I mean, anybody who's been here a long time knows. Big fan. We're big fans of Oasis here. Remember my whole Britpop stream, Britpop analysis. So, yeah, that'd be super cool, dude. I was up when they made the announcement, and then when they did the 8 o'clock, which is 3 a.m. announcement, I happened to see it. And I think the tickets go on sale August 31st. I'm probably going to sell out right away. I'm sure they'll sell out so fast. But, hey, man, yeah, that'd be cool to go see Oasis. Anyway, so Will Graham gets the indication the Red Dragon was there. He's looking into the house. He sees that he was stalking them, and he knows that he cut the branch with the bolt cutters because he takes it to the crime lab. They analyze the angle of it, the residue or whatever, and they find out it was bolt cutters. And he knows that the branch in there because the guy was cognizant of his stalking situation and all of his leftover evidence when he did this. So, of course, he removes the branch. He takes it to another place, doesn't leave it at the foot of the tree. That's ridiculous that he would do that. Yeah, they are officially back. They're back. Yeah, we are so back. Yeah, supersonic. So anyway, Will goes through a bunch of things trying to catch Red Dragon, Francis Dollarhide. He eventually uses Freddie Lowndes, who is a kind of rag writer, played by Stephen Lang in Manhunter, and Philip Seymour Hoffman in Red Dragon. And one of the great things about the book is that this is not what happens in the book. This guy's a POS who sneaks into the hospital room, and Will Graham takes pictures of him after he's been stabbed by Lecter. And it's kind of weird because it's like this trope is not truthful. We rarely. I don't know if there's ever a time when I've noticed in the media that they're covering a famous detective on the case of somebody like that. Even with the Idaho Brian Koberger thing, that's the lady. That lady is only famous because he took a class with her. The court TV lady. So I just don't. That trope is kind of silly. But what happens in the book is that Dollarhide he kidnaps Freddie Lowndes chloroforms him, takes him back to his house, and he uses him as a counter trap to catch Will Graham because they've set up fake a sting where they use a former Secret Service safe house, and they try and catch him that way by using the cipher, using the coded message that he sent Hannibal Lecter on toilet paper, and they analyze it, and they think they can catch him by sending a fake message. And but what happens in the book is that he sets him on fire, and that Lowndes, and he wheels him in the wheelchair down into the parking lot of the Tatler newspaper. But in the book, there's still time for them to put out the fire, and he's in serious pain in the hospital. He's on his deathbed, about to die. They take him out of his coma, and the last thing he says is the license plate. So he dies trying to help Will, and Will actually goes to his funeral. So it's a totally different character than it is in the two films. I think they left that out just because it's too full. It's too much to cover in a film. But one of the interesting things about that is that when he writes the coded message to Lecter, they figure out that the cipher that he uses is because he throws them off by including biblical passages. He uses Galatians and a few other passages, Revelation, but they are not like he uses chapters that are not in the Bible. In other words, the chapter is cut off before the number. So they figure out that it's just it's a code within a code, and they need the cipher. And Will at one point says that a few years ago they chloroformed, or not they chloroformed. They what is the thing? Not chlorohydrate, not Seconal. What's the truth serum? What's the truth drug that they use? Sodium, is it pentothal? Sodium pentothal. They use that to try to get information from Lecter, but all he got was a cooking recipe. Well, they figure out that that's the cipher. So what Lecter writes back shows that Lecter outwits the FBI because they put a fake message in the Tatler trying to pretend to be a response from Lecter. But they could never do what Lecter does in terms of picking the verbiage that he uses. It's too wild. Lecter says, "Dear avid fan, you are very beautiful. I send you 100 prayers." And this to me is the kind of writing that is almost completely occult. It's almost like a Enochian language that he uses to talk to this guy. It's in English, but the diction here, the choice of words is so outrageous that without the criminal mind, without the criminal mind mixed with the predatory occult mind, no, I don't think anybody could imagine this very specific language that Lecter uses here. Anyway, so Will Graham ends up, he's on the case, and he eventually figures out that in Manhunter that the thing that unites all of the victims is their films that he's been watching the whole time, which is very good because it shows that like Dollarhide hiding in plain sight, like Lecter hiding in plain sight, the evidence is hiding in plain sight. It's the film, and so he immediately calls the lab and he says, get all the evidence from the locker, and you might find film canisters. This has been sitting there the whole time, and he didn't notice. He picked up the film canisters, and they give an address. He peels it off. He peels off the address, and there's another address below, and that's the Gateway Film Lab in St. Louis. And it's a different name in the film, but they use Gateway. It's interesting they use Gateway. Did you know that? Remember the reporter getting red pilled in real time? The CIA's Gateway program. Remember that? So it's a gateway. It's a gateway because it's part of the portal to the great becoming, which is through film. And Dollarhide is sort of running a film of the events in his brain, but also he watches the films of the families while he's doing his rituals at home. And he has made his own films that they don't show in the films, in the film Red Dragon or Manhunter. And these films are the kind of Leonard Lake, Charles Ng uh, 8mm films that he records while he is doing his ritual murders, and we get an indication that he's doing this in the first scene of Manhunter, because the first thing that we see is from the killer's perspective, walking into the house, going up the stairs, and we see the wife in slow motion waking up with lights on her, like a camera has lights on and is watching her. At one point, Dollarhide in the book imagines that in the next the Shermans, the group he's targeting next, he may even be able to creepy crawl up through the sheets of the bed between the husband and wife before he does the event, which is so insane. And uh, you know, that's Lecter's thing, is to not be called insane. He's not. Will Graham explains in the book that he's not insane how we think of insanity. He is. He simply possesses a complete, liberating, dark, satanic ability to consume his victims and to be his dark passenger self, which he considers his true self. These are sick people. And I haven't even covered the aspects dealing with Blake and the tiger and what happens with Reba. So one of the things that happens is that Dollarhide in his film lab is looking for infrared and night vision film, because the film lab that he works for has been contracted by the Defense Department to come up with a film stock that could be used for reconnaissance and night vision. And he requests this from this lady Reba, who's in charge of the dark room. And this takes a particular type of film that they have to use, like a silver emulsifier or whatever. It has to be handled in complete darkness. That's why she has the job, because she lives in complete darkness, because she is seeing impaired. And he has the presence of mind when he requests it to say that it's for the zoo, because they need to catch night predators. He being a night predator, right? Well, that is the reason why he then fulfills this kind of lie by taking her to pet the tiger. Now, this again is one of the most beautiful scenes in film. It's crazy. It's a kind of, and by beautiful I mean a terrible beauty, as William Butler Yeats describes it. Because, okay, so there's a scene in the book where Ralph Fiennes gets in his van and he goes to pick up Reba outside, and he says, "Ride with me." "No, thank you. I have a bus waiting for me. I have got to ride." "Ride with me." "No, it's okay. Ride with me. It would be for my pleasure." He says, "It would be for my pleasure." And when I saw that in the Red Dragon film, I knew that the reason that Ralph Fiennes says that Dollarhide says that, is because he is imitating a human being. He thinks that is what a dude would say trying to rizz up a woman. But there's a kind of uncanny valley here where it sounds so odd that he uses the word pleasure in that sentence. That's odd. I mean, that's very odd. You know, that's like somebody saying, "Hey, would you like what's your favorite spider?" "Mine's a daddy long legs." "Do you live in a wood pile?" "I live in a wood pile." "Are you a black widow? Will you eat me afterwards after we have pleasure?" It's odd. It's very odd. It's off-putting. And when I read the book, when I got to that part of the book, guess what the next sentence is? Thomas Harris says, Dollarhide says this because he thinks this is what a person would say. So I have the eidetic, eidetecher criminal mind um, to imagine what the psychopath says when he is rizzing up a woman. But one thing annoying about Manhunter is that they change it. They change it. Why would you change it? Why would you change this? He says it would be the thing that I like. What are you talking about? The thing that you like? Why wouldn't you use? The whole point is the word pleasure. Oh, it bothers me when they do that. With film is like literature in terms of its holistic integrity. You cannot change the individual words that give charge to the whole scene. The words are it's the words that do it. God, it's so maddening. And that when they cut corners like this, do people understand that it's the little thing? Remember we did the analysis of the little things? It's the little things. It's not just the aesthetic resonance. It's not just the mood and the tone. It's not just the way it looks. It's not just even what the people are saying. It's the individual words. There's a great, I mean, okay, I'll get to that in a second. So he picks up Reba and they go to the zoo because they owe Dollarhide a favor because he has provided them with this film stock that they're using. They really did do that. And they have to cap a tooth on the tiger, so they have sedated the tiger. The tiger is 10 feet long from nose to tail, right, from the nape to the chops, as Macbeth says. No, from the nose to the tail, top full of direst cruelty, Lady Macbeth says. From the toe, top full. So it's interesting that it's a capped tooth. So do you understand that the tiger in Manhunter is the tooth fairy? That's the dragon. He's the dragon. He's the tooth fairy. He's Jaws. He's Dollarhide. He's the tiger. And he's also tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? The point of the poem, The Tiger, with Blake is that Blake has a set of matching books of poems, the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience, that are indicative of his Gnostic paradigm in life, which is that Songs of Innocence represent the innocent state of the child. So the lamb is obviously the Lamb of God. The Lamb is Christ, and little Tom Dacre, who is in one of his poems in The Chimney Sweeper, who is covered in soot and imagines himself running down and washing themselves and shining like gold, is that they are redeemed and that they are beautiful in their innocence and the grace of God. The tiger is the dark charge, as the opposite of the lamb, because in Blake's tiger, the tiger represents the fact that in life, he says, how could the hand that made the lamb make thee? Okay, well, the one of the beautiful thing about this poem in reality is that God creates all life, and that the tiger, while being the exact opposite of the lamb, is still a part of creation, but it's not full of a dark energy. It's not evil. But he says when the stars threw down their spears, the tiger represents a kind of killing camouflage that is encoded and imprinted on the surface of its skin. Its fur looks like fire. It looks like the tiger was a creature that was forged by Vulcan under the volcano. Right? It looks literally like fire, like flames. So when Reba goes to touch, she can't see the tiger, but this is an amazing scene. She puts her hand on the tiger's and grips the tiger's fur and grips its ear, and she feels charged with life. And then she leans down and hears the heartbeat of the tiger, And this is ultimate life pulsing in ordered time that she can feel viscerally, and the visual images will soak into her in auditory form. And she hears that again later when she makes love. She actually goes back. Remember, she goes back to Dollarhide's house and she makes love to him and senses the same powerful heartbeat within him. So he is the tiger to her. And I mean, this is a really amazing scene in the film. And the soundtrack, also the soundtrack is fantastic. I did think last time I talked about this, I thought maybe that Michael Mann used this soundtrack instead of Tangerine Dream, kind of because instead of using Tangerine Dream like he did with the movie Thief, which I thought would be what he wanted to do, but maybe they weren't available. I don't know. Whatever the case was, but I don't think that's what happened. I think he used this this other soundtrack with these other artists because what the scene where he's in the woods, by the way, the song, what's the song? The song is, hold on, let me find this for you real quick. This is crazy. When he's climbing up the tree, the song that is playing in the score is what's this other band? Hold on. I'm not gonna be able to find it right now. I forget the name of the band, but it sounds like Crystal Castles. I wouldn't be surprised if Crystal Castles sampled this. It's like Crystal Castles slowed down. Somebody could find that and put it in the comments afterwards. But the lyrics to the song, which are kind of faded through a synth, and they're vocoded. They sound like they're through a vocoder, are about looking there, darkness, blindness, and the moon. And of course, the whole thing that the killer is doing, that Dollarhide is doing, is he's on a lunar cycle. He is, and Lecter tells him that you've got to look for a yard in outside space, because he says, "Have you ever seen blood in the moonlight, Will? It appears quite black," which is an insanely that's an amazing image. That's something that, I mean, this is so dark. He's on a lunar cycle, so they're looking for the next full moon. But it's really insane how amazing the writing is here. Let me see if I can find this in the text. One thing it says it says, let's see, on this is on page 10 in the book when he walks in. He said, when Will walks into the first house, he says, the thermostat clicked and the air conditioning came on. Graham started at the noise, felt a trickle of fear. Sitting in the dark, he sensed madness like a bloodhound sniffs a shirt. And then he says, the bloodstains shouted at him from the wall. That's synesthesia. That's a mingling of the senses. A visual image and an auditory image mixed into one. The trickle of fear is crazy. Smashing mirrors and selecting shards is what he finds that he does on page 13 of the book. Later on, let's see, we get the criminal mind on page 45. Let me find some of these best passages. Oh, Lecter and the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. Let's see. He says, what did the psychologists call it? This is page 53. What did the psychologists call it? What was wrong with him? They say he's a sociopath because they don't know what else to call him. He has some of the characteristics of what they call a sociopath. He has no remorse or guilt at all, and he had the first and worst signs, sadism to animals as a child, but he doesn't have any other marks, Graham said. He wasn't a drifter. He had no history of trouble with the law. He wasn't shallow and exploitive in small things like most sociopaths are. He's not insensitive. They don't know what to call him. His electroencephalograms show some odd patterns, but they haven't been able to tell much from them. What would you call him? Graham hesitated. Just yourself. What do you call him? He's a monster. I think of him as one of those pitiful things that are born in hospitals from time to time. They feed it, keep it warm, but they don't put it on the machines and it dies. Lecter's the same way in his head, but he looks normal and nobody could tell. And that's it. That's amazing because that's exactly what happened to Dollarhide when he was born. It's really awful. Oh my god. Oh, this is this is crazy. This is not in the movies, and this is only you can only get this from the book. On page 62, when he goes to meet Lecter, Lecter is reading Alexander Dumas' Le Grand Dictionnaire de Cuisine, which is interesting because the Ninth Gate. Remember, the Ninth Gate is actually based on Dumas, and the book, the Dumas detective book. I can't remember the name of it. I read it. I read it in 2011, but they're looking for a rare Dumas book. And anyway, he's reading this book, and in the Manhunter film, he's on his side when he walks in. It's interesting because who pointed this out? Rob Ager pointed this out, that in the film, this is great that he pointed this out. In the film, in that scene when Will Graham walks in, what ends up happening is that our perspective shows that Graham walks in silently, sits down, and doesn't say anything, doesn't greet him. And we see Dr. Lecter on his side on the bed through the prison bars, but his head is concealed, and his head is concealed by the lock on the door. Like his head is locked up. Like we don't know the character yet. And the first thing he does is sniffs Will Graham's aftershave and then turns around, sits up like he's rising out of a coffin, and turns around and looks at Will Graham and doesn't blink. And he's very Bela Lugosi like in that scene. But the point is that in the scene, we break through the wall because it's a forced perspective. It's like the camera is behind Will, so now we have both characters in separate cells. And then when we see Will looking up at Lecter, he's also looking through prison bars. So we can't tell psychologically, it's very subtle, who's in prison. So, of course, Will Graham is not in prison, but he is in prison visiting Lecter, but he's still in the same room, locked up in terms of his psyche with Lecter. And in the book, it says, Dr. Lecter's eyes are maroon, and they reflect light redly in tiny points. Graham felt each hair bristle on his mane. He put his hand on the back of his neck. Graham felt that Lecter was looking through to the back of his skull. His attention felt like a fly walking around in there. That is insane. That is insane writing. That is really, really good. Look, man, I've covered Stephen King, and I've covered Firestarter and Misery, of course. And what else did I cover from Stephen King? I don't know. I've covered Stephen King and Cujo. I just did Cujo. But Stephen King couldn't write anything like that. This is, not that that's the marker. I'm just saying in terms of horror writing, this is very good. This is really, really, the imagery there is totally unthinkable. Because he's like a Beelzebub, he's like he's like a Dracula. He's vampirical, feeding on the blood energy of human beings. That's how he consumes them and carries on. And he becomes I become vapor, fog, right? Which is actually Anthony Hopkins. It's interesting because that's Anthony Hopkins in as what's his name, Van Helsing in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula movie, which is fantastic. I covered that, by the way, 2 years ago in the Bram Stoker literary stream. But it also reminds me of Psycho. We just covered Psycho. Remember the fly? I'm not even going to swat that fly, right? It's the fly on the face of Anthony Perkins at the end of Psycho when he has done what Dollarhide does here. We have A character who has completely, he's a complete serial killer who has embodied the dissociative spirit of his mother through his kind of exterior possession. Then we have two separate entities that we see in the film, and then at the end they are unified in one because he's dressed up as his mother, and then in the end he's consumed his mother. It's the voice of his mother speaking through Anthony Perkins, just like Dollarhide hears the voice of the Red Dragon talking to him. The red eyes is just unbelievable. That's just an unbelievable image. And they're maroon. It's not even, redly in tiny points. That matches a later part in the book where Dollarhide says that when Reba looks at him, he feels her vision moving over his body in tiny red points. Of course, Dollarhide writes to Lecter because ultimately, as Will figures out, he hopes to meet with him in real life in order to consume him. And it says on page 95 here that he imagines Lecter as a kind of Renaissance prince, which I guess would be, what's that guy's name? What's the spider prince? The French guy, the satanic guy's name? What's his name? Oh my God. What is somebody in chat, tell me, what was the Renaissance knight prince's name? The French guy who was the spider, who was doing all the satanic rituals. Is it Rene? It's Gilles de Rais. That's it. Gilles de Rais. Got it. I knew I went back into the halls of my mind palace and found it back there. Let's see. Moving on. Let's see. I wrote Zodiac, Son of Sam, on page 117. Oh, that's where. Yeah. Speaking of which, that's where Will tells him that that Dollarhide wants to meet Lecter in order to kill him, to consume him. They go through Hobbs, who was the first serial killer that they found. Here's the eye detector part. On page 152, they're talking about Will Graham, William Peterson's character. No, he's an eye detector. He has a remarkable visual memory, but I don't think he's psychic. He wouldn't let Duke test him. That doesn't mean anything, though. He hates to be prodded and poked. So do I. This is Crawford, who's Dennis Farina, talking. What he has in addition is pure empathy and projection, Dr. Bloom said. He can assume your point of view or mine, and maybe some other points of view that scare and sicken him. It's an uncomfortable gift, Jack. Perception's a tool that's pointed on both ends. Why aren't you ever alone with him? Because I have some professional curiosity about him, and he'd pick that up in a hurry. He's fast. A psychosomatic manifestation is why he's sick. Isn't that crazy? That's really good. Okay, so here's the Red Dragon revelation, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast him down to earth, which is why the Red Dragon resonates with Francis Dollarhide. On page 172, the first side was Blake's painting, The Great Man Dragon, wings flared and tail lashing, poised above the woman clothes with the sun. This is when Freddie Lowndes is there, and he says, and I like how Freddie Lowndes in this part says, when he's kidnapped by the Red Dragon, he says, what does he say? The first thing he says, and I think the last thing he says also before he gets set on fire, is he prays. He says, "Oh, my dear God, Jesus." And this is when Dollarhide does his little speech. Do you see? Yes. Click. Mrs. Leeds alive. Do you see? Yes. Click. Dollarhide, the dragon, rampant, muscles flexed, and tail tattooed above the Jacoby's bed. Do you see? Yes. Click. Miss Jacoby waiting. Do you see? Click. Mrs. Jacoby after. Do you see? Yes. Click. The dragon rampant. Do you see? Yes. Click. Mrs. Leeds waiting. Her husband slack beside her. Do you see? Yes. Click. Mrs. Leeds after. Harlequined with blood. Do you see? Harlequined with blood is insane. We get all. One of the things in the Harry book, the Prince Harry book, was this continuous phrase of red mist. And I found that, that's the reason I read the book in the first place, because of this writing. And I think that one of the, again, another motif that I keep discovering in these books about serial killers in the canon of prose, great literature here, which I think should be in the permanent canon here, like things like American Psycho, which is a great postmodern work of multi-layered. Same with Lunar Park by Bret Easton Ellis. But one of these things is we get this continuous phrase that's used, which is either a curtain of blood, a shower of blood, red mist, the spray of crimson, a vermilion canopy, which is this sheen of blood that washes over the visual perspective and spectrum of the serial killer. Harlequined with blood. It says on page 173, the fear in Lowndes' face freed Dollarhide to speak, and he could fly on sibilants and fricatives. Plosives were his great webbed wings. This is poetry. Your life to mine is a slug track on stone, a thin silver mucus track in and out of the letters on my monument. That makes me think of Ozymandias, Shelley's Ozymandias. Do you know about the guest star in 105.4? Of course not. Your readers follow you like a child follows a slug track with its finger, and in the same tired loops of reason. This is like Kurtz in Apocalypse Now. I've seen a snail crawl along the edge of a straight razor. This is my dream, my nightmare. It is in your nature to do one thing correctly. Before me, capitalized, you rightly tremble. Fear is not what you owe me. Lowndes, you and the other pismears, you owe me all. Dollarhide could not answer. He changed his teeth. He smiled at Lowndes' brown-stained smile. He's wearing his grandmother's teeth. He placed his hand on Lowndes' heart, and leaning to him intimately as though to kiss him, he bit Lowndes' lips off and spit them on the floor. Here's the red haze on page 194. Graham tried hard to know him. He tried to see him past the blinding glint of slides and vials beneath the liners of police reports, tried to see his face through the louvres of print. He tried as hard as he knew how, but to begin to understand the dragon, to hear the cold drips in his darkness, to watch the world through his red haze, Graham would have had to see things he could never see, and he would have had to fly through time. Interesting, fly. Do you see the web of words here? The fly is Graham being the fly, flying through time, but this matches the fly searching the back of his skull in the form of Lecter talking to him in his cell. I wrote here on page 201, Red Dragon comes from a politically influential family. This is just like serial killers in politics besides the Phoenix program. Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and Dahmer all having political connections, more. But Dollarhide comes from a politically influential family. His mother, who abandoned him, and then his grandmother who picks him up. His mother is connected to a famous Chicago political family, which is just another element that ties into the weird truthfulness of what this hits on in the book. One of the things Dollarhide says is that when he starts becoming this dragon when he's young, and he's practicing his sadism at the with the farm life, he says he would fight his fear of the dark. If he really loved grandmother, he should be the thing to be afraid of in the dark, the thing for the burglar to be afraid of. The love Francis felt almost burst him. He crept out of the room. He was frantic to be ready to protect her. He must do something. He did not fear the dark house now, but it was choking him. A tiny disk of moon distorted on the whites of his rolled back eyes, rounded as the eyes rolled down, and was centered at last in his pupils. It's like he absorbs the moon here, and the glint of the moon in the mirror shard blade that he will use to unleash an arterial red misty spray mixed in with the maroon eyes of Lecter. This is really strong writing. I mean, this is really good, and that the love almost burst him. That he is. That's one of the reasons why when he looks at the red dragon and he sees the wings flashing outwards, he becomes a kind of angel of death. But he's also red with a kind of with dark love, what he thinks is love, till he finally meets Reba and experiences love. And then what happens with Reba in the book is that he ends up seeing her being dropped off by another guy that they work with, and she's telling the guy, "I can't see you anymore. I'm seeing this guy. I'm seeing Dollarhide now." She calls him D, just like Dracula refers to himself in Bram Stoker. Your servant D. Right? And it's like people call me D. But anyway, so what up, D? That's what people say. So anyway, she's telling him that she don't want to see him anymore, and he leans in and gives her, I think he gives her a kiss, but in the book it's kind of like she gives him a kiss on the cheek goodbye. But when he sees this, he goes mad. He kills the guy, shoots him through the throat and then twice in the chest. And then what happens is he chloroforms her, takes her back to the house, and he's fighting with the red dragon within himself. He's gone to the Brooklyn Museum, and he has consumed the actual watercolor of Blake's Red Dragon, because now instead of having the exterior voice of Red Dragon in the form of his grandmother, who in Red Dragon the movie is Brenda Blethyn, which is pretty interesting. It's Ellen Burstyn. But she sounds like that episode of Family Guy. Like, just put it on the Schiffer rope. The what? The Chesterfield. Put it on the Chesterfield. I don't know. Just take your fucking keys. But she's yelling at him, "You dirty, ugly little thing," or whatever. And so he goes to the Brooklyn Museum and consumes the painting so that the voice of the Red Dragon will be buried within him, and he can be one with the dragon again like he was. Then he goes back to the house, and he's trying to fight with his alter, telling him, "I'm not going to, no, you can't have Reba. You can't have her." For various reasons. I mean, he had to fight the imagination of what it was like to consume her earlier, but also because people have spotted them on a date together. At this point, he doesn't really care. But when he takes her back and chloroforms her, what happens is that he gives her a test by taking a key from around his neck, which he actually doesn't wear. And then she goes to the door, and then she tries to run away. He says, "I will catch you." He says that to the gas station attendant, by the way, that he uses to trick Reba into thinking that he has blown his head off with a 12 gauge, because when he unalives himself thinking that he can unalive, I think he thinks he can unalive himself so that he can save her from the dragon. But what ends up really happening is that he unalives himself and the dragon takes over, because he goes on these shenanigans with the mixed up body. The body that he uses to trick Reba, who's blind, into thinking that it's him who's blown his head off, is the gas station attendant that he met earlier with Reba, who was giving him shit. And he tells the gas station attendant, "Don't run. I will catch you." And the guy turns around and sees a flash in his eyes that he'd never seen in another person before. I think this is probably incredibly accurate. When Dollarhide was in St. Louis and saw the Tattler appear on the street, the newest thing on the newsstand, he goes up to it, and the guy says, "Hey, get out of here! I gotta cut the newsstand open and place everything." And he cuts it himself, and he takes one, and the guy says, "Hey, come back here, or I'll," and he turns around and he says, "Or what? Or what?" So he is a menacing character with flashes of this, right? Uh, and then he says here, um, it says, sometime in his 20s, Dollarhide's memories of his mother's house sank out of sight, leaving a slick on the surface of his mind, which is an intentional, I think, subtle psychological indication that the slick is a kind of mirrored puddle, right? It's a black pool, which is just like the black blood glinting in the moonlight on the blade, and how he's avoided reflective surfaces, but he has absorbed one in his mind. It's way, way down deep inside. It says, what does it say? Sometimes he saw them in his sleep, in the brilliant fragments of a fever dream, altered and tall, faces and bodies in bright parrot colors. They poised over him in a mantis stance. Holy shit. Does that mean that, I mean, he's a kid looking up at the people in the house, but does it, I kind of get the feeling there's SRA, that he's also abused in the house by some of the people. Certainly his grandmother, but the other people. Caught at 17 entering the window of a woman's house for a purpose never established, he was given the choice of enlisting in the Army or facing charges. He took the Army. Did you know this about Dollarhide? After basic training, he was sent to specialist school in the darkroom operation and shipped to San Antonio, where he worked on medical corps training films at Brooke Army Hospital. Records at the film library showed Dollarhide checked out many films, mainly on trauma, and kept them overnight. Finally, he was able to go to Hong Kong twice on leave. Hong Kong and Kowloon could satisfy any appetite in 1959. Here's the part about William Blake. This is page 223. A full-length mirror was mounted on the wall of Dollarhide's attic gym beside his barbells and weight bench. It was the only mirror hanging in his house, and he could admire his body in it comfortably because he always worked out in a mask, persona mask. He examined himself carefully while his muscles were pumped up. At 40, he could have competed successfully in regional bodybuilding competition. He was not satisfied. Within the week, he came upon the Blake painting. It seized him instantly. He saw it in a large full-color photograph in Time magazine illustrating a report on the Blake retrospective at the Tate Museum in London. Fantastic museum, the Tate Museum. Great museum. I wonder if it has anything to do with those two fellas. Probably not. It was called that long before the Tate Museum. Modern art there. Lots of depraved, decadent modern art. I prefer the classical museums. The Brooklyn Museum had sent the Great Red Dragon and the woman clothed with the sun to London for the show. Times critics said, yeah, here we go. This is in the book. Few demonic images in Western art radiate such a nightmarish charge of sexual energy. Dollarhide didn't have to read the text to find that out. He carried the picture with him for days, photographed and enlarged it in the darkroom late at night. He was agitated much of the time. He posted the painting beside his mirror in the weight room and stared at it while pumped. He could sleep only when he had workout to exhaustion and watched his medical films. Gross. Anyway, page 228, when he's talking about Reba has a star-shaped scar on the bridge of her nose. That reminds me of the stream I did with Maddie talking about the latest True Detective season, star-shaped wounds, remember? He was free to look at her. His gaze could move over her as freely as the air. She had no way to parry eyes. Dollarhide often felt warm spots, here you go, stinging spots on his skin when he talked to a woman. They moved over him to wherever he thought the woman was looking. Even when a woman looked away from him, he suspected he saw his reflection. He was always aware of reflected surfaces, knew the angles of reflection as a pool shark knows the banks. Shark. Pool shark. Okay, here's the part with the tiger, page 255. She gripped the edges of the table and reached out tentatively until her fingers touched tips of fur, warm from the lights, a cooler layer, and then a deep, steady warmth from below. She flattened her hand on the thick coat and moved it gently, feeling the fur slide across her palm with and against the lay, felt the hide slide over the wide ribs as they rose and fell. She gripped the pelt, and fur sprang between her fingers. In the very presence of the tiger, her face grew pink, and she lapsed into blindisms, inappropriate facial movements she'd schooled herself against. Warfield and Hassler saw her forget herself and were glad. They saw her through a wavy window, a pane of new sensation she pressed her face against. As he watched from the shadows, the great muscles in Dollarhide's back quivered. A drop of sweat bounced down his ribs. She felt the roughness of the pads and smelled faintly the cage floor. He pressed a toe to make the claw slide out. The heavy, supple muscles of the shoulders filled her hands. She felt the tiger's ears, the width of his head, and carefully the veterinarian guiding her touched the roughness of his tongue. Hot breath stirred the hair on her forearms. Last, Dr. Warfield put the stethoscope in his ears, her hands on the rhythmic chest, her face upturned. She was filled with the tiger's heart's bright thunder. Fuck, dude. This is so good, man. This is so good. There was a charge in the air, like fluorescence in the sea. It limned movement. It's just very good, dude. It's very good. God, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at the book here. Images, Baroque pearls flying through the friendly dark. A very pistol he had fired at the moon. A great firework he saw in Hong Kong called the dragon sows its pearls. The dragon. He felt stunned, cloven. And then he hears the voice of the dragon talking to him, Francis. He knew the voice came from his room. He knew it was the voice of the dragon. This new two-ness with the dragon disoriented him. He first felt it when he put his hand on Reba's heart. Isn't that wild? He dissociates when he has fun, when he actually has human contact. Right? Wow. Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry. I got lost in the text here for a minute. Okay. The dragon dissociates. I want to find the part where she's talking to him and feels the so afterwards, yeah, here it is. Afterwards, uh yeah, Dandridge is a fool. Ride with me. What would someone say? For my pleasure. They go to his house, and the way she talks to him is amazing. I mean, she says, it says, you haven't said anything lately. In fact, you haven't said anything since I mentioned speech therapy. Her voice was kind but firm. It carried no taint of sympathy. I understand you fine because you speak very well and because I listen. People don't pay attention. They ask me what all the time. If you don't want to talk, okay, but I hope you will talk because you can, and I'm interested in what you have to say. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's, you know, it's rare to meet someone who really, I mean, that's what, I guess that's what Michael Caine talked about when he was talking about acting, if this is my metaphor here. I mean, that people think that acting is reacting, which is not true. That acting is listening, which is a metaphor for real life, for listening to someone, active listening. talking to someone where they really are interested. And I've talked about this before where, in real life talking to people often you see this with other people talking that people that have no stamina that there's something really going on with people's cognition in real life. In a general sense, you meet people like this all the time that people just don't seem to be there. They don't seem to have a presence of mind or a physical presence in a conversation a lot of times. You know, um, I think that one of the indications of this when you're talking to someone is that it's just a slight eye movement. It's not something you can ever bring up. That would make you a psycho if you brought it up in correcting someone in a conversation. I'm saying that you notice it. It's the little things when you're talking to someone and they look. And I'm not talking about on the internet. I'm talking about in real life when you're talking to someone and they're looking elsewhere, or they're checking their watch, or they're checking their phone, they're checking the doom scroll. People live in an infinite scroll that makes them everywhere but where they are. And looking a person in the eye is certainly something that has gone away. I mean, everybody knows, people, your dad, or whoever telling you when you're talking to somebody, look them in the eye. When you're shaking hands with somebody, look them in the eye. And they were right. They were right about those things. I don't know why it's so hard for people to look people in the eye now when you talk to people in real life, but it it is it's a sign of respect for a person. It's a sign of being there. If you really are with someone in real life and you're listening to them, you are your your mind sees the images of whatever the conversation is, and you see beyond them, but you are looking at you imagine what they're thinking. You imagine their thoughts. Why did they say the things they did? What does it mean? And you're listening to them talk. I think that's gone. It's amazing that this book of all books would really bring that out. Page 241, I wrote excellent passages. It would be so nice to be wanted by someone with the courage to get his hat or stay as he damn pleased, and who gave her credit for the same, someone who didn't worry about her. She had never seen or touched a cleft lip and had no visual associations with the sound. She wondered if Dollarhide thought she understood him easily because blind people hear so much better than we do. That was a common myth. Maybe she should have explained to him that it was not true, that blind people simply pay more attention to what they hear. There were so many misconceptions about the blind. She wondered if Dollarhide shared the popular belief that the blind are purer in spirit than most people, that they are somehow sanctified by their affliction. She smiled to herself. That one wasn't true either. She's just a person. And there's there's an amazing passage here where she goes back to his house, and okay, here it is, page 258 and 259. Suddenly Reba, because she brings up his speech, suddenly Reba felt that she was alone in the room, that the place where he had stood was emptier than empty, a black hole swallowing everything and emanating nothing. She knew he could not have left without her hearing him. That's interesting because it almost it shows the likeness that these two characters have in one thing, that it's almost like when she says that he couldn't have left without her knowing anything, without her knowing that she has, in an auditory sense, what Lecter has in an olfactory sense, and what Dollarhide has in a visual sense, but lacks with his speech. So he can't communicate verbally with people like how he wants to unless he's the dragon. And when he's free to do so at the moment of death. And it's almost like she's a hunter in this situation. Like she's aware of him, and she don't want to trap him, but she wants to serve. She wants to know him. She wants to give. Like she wants to give, and she wants him to give to her. I just think it's lovely. It's just very great. And the fact that he disappears into this blackness is again indicative of his the black hole nature of like the hole in his chest and his soul. And by the way, the book ends with a post epigraph, which is rare in a novel. And I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is vexation of spirit. Ecclesiastes. So that's Red Dragon, the book. Have you ever read Proverbs of Hell from William Blake? Because, this is my Blake book. This is my Blake book. This is my little Blake book that I've had since I was 16 is when I went and got this book. I recently covered Blake because I was talking about, in one of the streams, I was talking about Journey to the End of the Night, the Celine book, Ferdinand Celine. And that was amazing because I remember Jim Morrison in his End of the Night song by the Doors titled the poem. I mean, the lyrics are a reference to Celine's Journey to the End of the Night, but it's also a direct quote from Blake, right? Some are born to endless night. Some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight. It's William Blake. William Blake's character in his books, Urizen, is the character that he mentions as the triumph of reason in the Romantic age, centering around the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. But he sees a visual representation of the delineation between reason and spirit, and which is kind of what Rimbaud does in A Season in Hell. A Season in Hell is probably the most Gnostic. It's the Gnostic gospel if there ever was one. But he says one body and one spirit at the end, Christmas on Earth. But Blake sees things as a visual image of dark energy, and in Urizen is the climactic interpretation of that. Proverbs from Hell are very famous. You probably read many of these. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. He who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. Dip him in the river who loves water. He whose face gives no light shall never become a star. That's Crowleyan. The busy bee has no time for sorrow. No bird soars too high if he soars with his own wings. That is the quote that my friend Brad had on a poster of Michael Jordan in his room when we were in 5th grade. It's a poster of very famous poster of Michael Jordan palming a basketball with his wing spread. The most sublime act is to set another before you. Folly is the cloak of knavery. He says, excess of sorrow laughs, excess of joy weeps. Joys impregnate, sorrows bring forth. The bird a nest, the spider a web, man friendship. The cistern contains, the fountain overflows. There's one in here I always think about, which is, beware the standing water, it contains poison. Think in the morning, act in the noon, eat in the evening, sleep in the night. As the plow follows words, so God rewards prayers. The tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. Here's my favorite. When thou seest an eagle, thou seest a portion of genius. Lift up thy head. Yep, there it is. Enough or too much? Enough or too much? All right, that's William Blake. So that's Blake, Manhunter, Red Dragon, a little bit about Silence of the Lambs. Dr. Lecter. Dr. Lecter, did you see me in Taxi Driver? I shouldn't be in this movie. I should be Holly Hunter. All right, y'all. What about a little super chat action here? We got any super chats? Let's see. Let's check it out. Let's check out these first of all. We got let's see. Oh, we got some support here tonight. We got some big ballers. Let's see. Hey, shouts out to Buster, first of all. $10 Venmo says, good broadcast. Thank you, Buster. Appreciate you. Shouts out to Buster out there. Hey, let's see. Let's give a shout out to, I don't know if you want me to say the names here because they look like real names. So I'm going to give some, I don't want to dox anybody with names. So I'm going to say, hey, shouts out to Nick right here. That's what I'll say. Shouts out to Nick for that $10 on PayPal. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Let's see. Let me look at this real quick. Hold on. Give me a second here. We're chilling tonight, you guys. Hey, thanks for being here, y'all. Really appreciate you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming by, swinging by. Hey, I'm going to say shouts out to Nate D. That's what I'm going to say. Shouts out to Nate D out there who dropped a big fat super chat for $126.38. Hey, shouts out to you. Thank you so much. Sir, really appreciate you out there on PayPal. Thank you so much. Big time. Shouts out to you. You are a true high IQ book analyzer. You are a true PBR Street Gang member. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. That is awesome. What a great donation there. Thank you so much. That is so sick, dude. That's awesome. Hey, shouts out to Jason right there. Man, love you so much, Jason. $15 on PayPal. Thank you so much, Jason. You are the best. You are great. Welcome to the broadcast. You're wonderful, and I thank you. Thanks so much, buddy. Really appreciate you, man. Thank you for all the support. Thank you so much, dude. That's great. Let's see. Hey, shout out to David Patrick Harry, who did that stream with me on Michael Clayton. You can catch that here in the members channel, the VIP section. I got a new playlist up there with VIP. And also, you can grab a membership for $5 a month. A lot of y'all already have memberships, so thank you so much for grabbing a membership. If you got one, if you want to renew it when it comes up, that helps me so much. So shouts out to our friend Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Harry. It's also on his channel for free. It's up there. So, but you can also check it in the member section of mine. Full transparency, folks. We're being transparent here. So thank you to David Patrick Harry right there. And let's see. Let me check the super chats. Shouts out to, hey man, shouts out to Ethan out there who dropped me $10 a few days ago. Came in just in time when I really needed it. Thank you so much, Ethan. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Shouts out to Real John Connor for that $5 on Cash App last time. Thank you, man. You rock, dude. Also, let's look at some super chats here. Had a good little stream tonight. What are we going, 2.5 hours? Hey, shouts out to Circle G out there, homeboy, longtime supporter, Circle G, $10. He said, Dr. Lecter, Dr. Lecter, did you know we're starring in a reboot? You've been recasted. Man, Hunter is a better film and visually more pleasing, and Brian Cox was underappreciated. Yes, sir, he was. Brian Cox was underappreciated. Brian Cox rules. If you want to see Brian Cox's best performances, aside from, I know he did the TV show recently, his best performances, the ba-da-ba-ba-ba in the McDonald's commercial. McDee's. Brian Cox is a great salesman for McDee's. Also, I'm Your Uncle, Argyle in Braveheart. And finally, his performance as what's his name? McGee, what's his name? What's the screenwriter's name? Hold on. He's in Adaptation. McKee? Is it Robert McKee? Oh, he's so good, dude. He's so good. I think it's Robert McKee. He was a real screenwriter. Remember Nick Cage goes to the screenwriting seminar, and yeah, it's got to be Robert. I think it's Robert McKee. Anyway, he goes to screenwriting seminar, and he goes, what if you don't have a story? Yeah, thank you, PC Baz. Yeah, Robert McKee. He goes to the seminar, and he says, what if you don't have a story? What if it just ends? And he goes, what? He goes, what the you even doing talking about that. Things happen every day. That's actually pretty good. Things happen every day. That's pretty good, Brian Cox. Things happen every day. People fall in love. People fall out of love. People fight. They fall out of love. Things happen every day. What the f are you even talking about? And then afterwards he sees him and he goes, let's go get a drink. That's his best role, dude. I mean, he's so good. But Manhunter, I mean, he's phenomenal. He is really menacing. He steals the movie. But I would say he steals the movie. But Peterson is so good. I mean, this is really, I'm not going to go on anymore about how good the acting is. It's really great. Hey, Pim, thank you so much for that $20. Thank you for that super chat. BLA Stream, thanks for making my night. Thank you so much, Pim, for dropping that. Did I miss any super chats? I don't know if I missed any more. Thank you so much to everybody who donated. Really appreciate you. If you want to grab a membership, go ahead and grab one. Got a bunch of those. I mean, those are mostly movie streams. Again, I will be back here soon in the Burr months. Pumpkin spice latte. Ooh, pumpkin spice. Kiss me under the bearded. It's September almost. Wake me up when September gets here. Right? You guys, it's my birthday month. We'll have a big birthday stream. We had a big one last year. Remember that? The Point Break stream? We had a big stream last year on my birthday. Turned into big double 4. But, you know, so I'll be doing a big stream with Jamie on talking about Prince Harry and his autobiography, which I think, you know, you might not think that sounds interesting. Maybe. I don't know what you think. I don't know. You're you and I'm me. If I were you, then you'd be me. No, if you don't think that sounds interesting, then I just ask you to just come to the stream anyway when we do it, because I think it's going to be pretty illuminating for people. Illuminate, confirm. I think it'll be pretty enlightening for some people, because it's not at all what I thought it would be. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the opposite of the J.D. Vance autobiography. It's the complete opposite. So we'll be doing that soon. What else? Got sponsored streams coming up. If you want to sponsor a stream, please reach out to me on madmaximalism2x@gmail.com and also on PayPal. And if you want me to do a Coast stream with DPH, we can hook that up for you. You'll give us some ideas. Please think about gifting some memberships, all that stuff. And hey, maybe I'll see you at Oasis, right? Listen, if Oasis comes to America, I'll pretty much go anywhere to go see them. But you know that they'll come to D.C. They'll come to probably D.C. and they'll probably come to North Carolina. So I'll go to either one of those. I'll certainly go to the D.C. show for sure. But we should make that an event. We should get us together and go to that. I need to be myself. Did you know that Oasis is so good, and I think is appealing not just because they make bangers all day long. I mean, but because the lyrics of the songs are about singular solo issues from a character who is facing the life ahead of them as a youth. That's why those songs on the first 2 albums are so good, because they're insular. They're about things that we've all experienced as teenagers or as, young, disaffected people. The later songs veer from that because they get bigger in scope. That's when artists often, I'm not saying Oasis has done this, other artists, though, lose their edge when they are too widely appealing. It's often better to appeal to people on the outside from talking about the inside, which again is what great art focuses on. One of those things, finding out what we're doing here and why we're here and how do we make our way through life. So, so I will go see Oasis. In the meantime, I hope everybody has gosh, I mean, I've been working now I've been so busy and all this stuff, but I'll be coming back with more streams, and it's been a wild summer. I mean, it hadn't really been summer for me for a minute because of going back, with working and stuff, but I'm ready for September. I'm ready for fall, autumn, And I will be on TNT Radio on Friday with Burmis at 4:40 Eastern Time with Jason Burmis. So please check that out. See, you can see me over there. Whatever we're talking about, whatever our topic. And yo, that's about it. That's about all I've got tonight. Thank you for being here for Red Dragon, William Blake. Please check out the other Michael Mann streams I've covered. I've done Thief, Heat. I covered the Michael Mann book. Yo, I forgot. I've covered Michael Mann Heat 2, which the movie is coming out about that. But go back in the archives there, and I covered Heat 2, the novel, and Heat, the film. I've also covered the Tom Coombe, Michael Mann. I've covered Thief. I've covered The Keep, and the book version of The Keep. I've covered a bunch of things that relate to this, all the romantic poets. I covered the biography of Lord Byron. So go back and watch those and check out those literary streams. This one was a literary stream in the horror canon, but I really think this is a fantastic book. I really do think that the writing is visceral. So cheers to y'all. I appreciate you. Let's play us out with, what does that mean to play us out? To end the show? All right, go. And that's Sting. And to play, yeah, can't do it. Can't do it. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks. And that'll do it for us tonight. Here's Sting and cut off his new album. Take it away. Ready? Here's Rooks G with Power Trippin'. Check out Rooks G. Here we go, y'all. Hey, by the way, listen. Was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. Here we go.